Welcome back. This is the Scaling Secrets podcast. Mr. Scott Wozniak is here, and he's the CEO of Swaz Consulting. Now, Scott has consulted with leaders on 6 continents. You can see some of them behind him on the map. Those include Silicon Valley startups, multi-generation family enterprises, and Fortune 500 companies. Scott is a super smart dude. He's a Mensa member. He reads 200 books each year. He's written 4 books, but his latest book is called Make Your Brand Legendary. It debuted #1 on Amazon in the customer category. And Scott is here today to talk about some of these ideas about AI, customer experience, building legendary brands. He's worked with some of these unicorns like Chick-fil-A. He's spent 20 plus years helping people become the kings of their categories. So we're going to find out those deep, dark secrets from Scott, what he's learned and how we can apply them. So Scott, super pumped to be talking to you.
Thanks, Robert. I've been looking forward to this, man.
Well, great. And the feeling is mutual. And so we hyped you up a little bit, but in your own words, what are you all about? What makes you unique? What has you just passionate and fired up these days?
Man, I have spent my life really with some of the greats in their categories. And then the last 20 years helping people like actually get to that place. And so it's that whole good to great zone. Like, what does the top level look like? How do you get to the level of raving fans, not just satisfied customers? And some of this ends up, what I'll tell you is what people often think of is, oh, how do I get big and then I'll get awesome? And what I've learned is get awesome, and that awesomeness will drive your size and your scale much better than squeezing your way with this thing. I hope nobody notices how bad we are, but we're growing so fast. So that process of how do you, now we get into a lot of growth and growth hacking and all that, but it's not growth for growth's sake. It's how do we get so awesome that the raving fans talk all about us and the viral buzz happens, and then we manage our growth. So that's been my passion, man. How do you get to that top level raving fans kind of situation?
I love it. That's something that we all want. It's a huge, noble goal. And it seems like it's not easily attainable, and that maybe many companies don't even know that this is something they should pursue, or maybe they're in the type of pursuit where they know they want it, but they don't actually know the path to do it. And so what's the logical starting point jumping off on this? If someone says, well, I understand so far that growing and becoming huge might just be replicating the mistakes. I want to become an awesome company. How do I even begin on this journey of doing it?
Man, so we talk about this engine, right? And there's all these tactical things to do it. But the first part of the engine, the fuel that drives everything else, that's the way we draw the diagram. It's actual fuel pouring in the engine, is customer insight. Do you really know your customers? Who are you serving? What do they care about? What's going on? And what we find is this is the biggest accelerator of them all. The less you know your customers, the more guessing you do, the more waste you have, the more you throw a bunch of things out and half of them hit or 20% hit, or they get some response, but not great. If you want to go upstream and put some effort into really understanding the world and mind and life and heart of your customer, that insight, man, that just accelerates everything else. So in the metaphor, with the engine, the fuel, right? Do you know that you could put raw oil in a combustion engine and a crude oil, and it'll turn over? Specifically, diesel engines. You put crude oil in a diesel engine, it'll run. Now, it's a mess, right? It's very wasteful. It's a lot hard on the engine. There's a lot of wasteful by the amount of crude you got to pump into that. It is not an efficient process, but you can just pump crude oil into the deal and get some product. This is what we see a lot of companies do. They'll tell us, we have customer insight. We got to figure it out. And what we actually discover, they don't have customer insight. They have customer data. It's crude, right? It's raw. We know what they buy, when they buy, the patterns, and we know their region or district or great. But why? Do you know what they really care about? Listen, let me just put it bluntly. They don't care about your thing. The thing you sell, it's how your thing makes their life better. You are a means to an end. And if you don't know the end, then gosh, it's going to be very hard for you to do the kind of things. You're going to be guessing a lot. It's the crude data, and you'll throw a bunch at the wall and hope you see what sticks. Whereas if you actually know what they really are there for, you get a wildly different. Let me give you a Chick-fil-A example that maybe flesh this out. So in the restaurant world, we talk about the difference between soccer mom Sarah and business owner Beth. Now, both of these women are 37 years old. They both come to Chick-fil-A every Monday. They buy the number one value meal. They both have 2.3 kids. Statistically, it's the same woman, right? You'd think, we know what she's here. She's here for the food. Not really. I mean, sort of. Yeah, they definitely want some food. But see, soccer mom Sarah, we know, is coming with two of her kids. One's in a stroller. She's there to meet other moms or have mom's morning out. The kids are going to play in the playground. It's a social hour. She's coming with gear. She's going to be there for a while. The way we train to, like, how do you serve these people? We teach staff, hey, carry trays to the table, right? Her hands are full of baby gear. So like, get out from behind the counter, say, hey, let me help you with that. And take stuff. We've got these little plastic mats with cartoon characters on them and stickers, and you stick it on the table and the kids can make a mess. And it's easy cleanup and mom feels like it's sanitary. She loves that. Soccer mom Sarah just thinks this is the best. Social hour, cartoon sticker mats. You'll help me carry my junk. You'll come back and refresh stuff for me, chat with me a little bit, get all social. Well, gosh, business owner Beth is not there for social hour. Now, she still wants food, right? Your thing still has to be good quality, but she's there to get away from the social pressure of the office. She's probably only got 30 minutes, 45 max. She's on a lunch break, right? She wants to sit on the other end of the restaurant away from the chaos. She wants quiet. She doesn't even want you to chat her up too much. She just wants a little space where she can refresh, have a little emotional oasis in the middle of a high pressure day. They both want a good sandwich, but the real reason they're coming is totally different. And if you don't know the difference, then you'll start treating Sarah like Beth or Beth like Sarah. And you're wondering, like, why she doesn't care? What we're doing this cool plastic, and Beth doesn't want you to put cartoon plastic mat in front of her, right? Like, that's almost demeaning. Listen, I'm a business professional. What are you doing here? What blows Sarah's mind doesn't help Beth. And you might have 2 or 3 of kind of these customer archetypes or profiles. But if you really get to know your customers, man, little things allow you to blow their mind. It's not that hard. And I think where people think it's that hard is because they're guessing. They've got no idea what's going on, right? They're like, I guess we'll do some cool. We saw this other company do this cool thing. We should do a cool thing. Well, maybe your ideal customer isn't like your competitors. So maybe the cool thing that their customers love. Or let me just tell you, you want to talk about dirty secrets and behind the scenes. I've seen a lot. So my job, I've spent the last 20 years going inside brands, working with them, figuring out how they tactically do it, and then coming back and bringing the lessons out to my other clients. So, dude, a lot of the stuff people go to copy, it's not working. It looks fun on the outside. And then you go inside and find out like, it actually isn't valuable to the company. There's no improvement in sales, or it cost them more than you think, or it actually caused a problem you're not aware of. Now, I'm not saying don't borrow cool ideas. I do that all the time, but I'm like, don't assume because your competitor is doing something that it's actually working. There's a ridiculous amount of companies who just guess. And the guessing, if they don't know their customer, they're throwing stuff at the wall, and the majority of it's not sticking, man. The reason we think it's hard is because we don't know. We're in our little box in our site, hold up in our offices, guessing about those customers out there. Do the hard work of regularly getting out there, getting face-to-face and industry data and surveys. And there's a whole set of things you can do that makes sure I really know who these people are, what they care about, how we serve their life. Oh, well, gosh, I described soccer mom Sarah, you can probably come up with half a dozen other things that she would love, or business owner Beth, and the things she would love. And it's not that hard to make a raving fan out of them if you really know who they are.
Wonderful. There's already a great collection of ideas for us to think about just right off the bat. And you're saying that you're a Wozniak, and I'm curious to know if you're related, right? But like Apple was all about this. They said like the Macintosh is not the thing; it's what gets you to the thing, right? Or like when you have an iPad, it's not about the iPad itself; it's that you can play music on it or you can draw with it. So it's like more like that whole.
Or even the original iPod wasn't a music player; it was 1,000 songs in my
pocket.
Yeah,
yes,
it's what it does for me. Oh, who cares how it does it, right? Just do it easy. So Wozniak. So those of you who don't know, so Steve Wozniak founded this little company with his best buddy called Steve Jobs. The company's Apple, right? In fact, Jobs didn't make any of the tech. Wozniak built all the original Apple, all that stuff. Wozniak would invent and Jobs would sell. That was always the partnership. Yeah. So okay, listen, my first cousin is Steve Wozniak. We grew up together just 20 minutes down the road. Unfortunately, Robert, not that Steve Wozniak. Totally
Oh,
different Steve
darn.
Wozniak. I know. I'm like,
Oh.
oh, come on, man. My cousin's got some fun stories where, like, Apple Store, they'd never believe him. Like, what's your name? Steve Wozniak. They're like, okay, funny, sure. What's your real name? He's like, pull out ID. He once got a phone call from some random folks. He's like, there's Steve Wozniak. We've been trying to get a hold of you. He's like, yeah, what can I do for you? And they're like, okay, so we want Ashton Kutcher to play Steve Jobs in the movie. He's like, okay. They're like, so you're okay with that? He's like, yeah, sure. He's cool. They're like, okay, good. He's like, wait. What's this call about? And it turns out there was a contractual obligation that Wozniak had to approve who played Jobs in the movie. So he then told them, hey, we said he was actually tempted in the moment to be like, oh yeah, no. By the way, I've moved, so send your checks to Steve Wozniak at this new
Over there.
address, right?
Yeah.
But he had integrity, good for him, and just told him wrong, Steve. So yeah, no, wrong, Steve. Steve Wozniak, that guy is an awesome guy, and my cousin, and Steve
But not
Wozniak
even
who
the
founded Apple, as far as I know. So my great grandparents emigrated, the Wozniaks, to the U.S. It's a Polish name. Maybe if you go back before that, but I know everybody in that line, and there's only one Steve, and it's not the Apple guy. So
oh, darn. Well,
but
it's like a Michael Bolton situation from Office Space. But
yes,
so anyway,
yes,
so just to digest your ideas here. So I love the crude oil kind of concept here, that because you think about, like, well, you'd want your company if you graded it to be an A, right? Like a Hershey or a Disney.
yeah,
And then if it's like a C, if it's failing or not good, that's obvious. But the danger is if it's a B, right? If it's kind of like just kind of long, and you're saying that maybe the reason why these companies could be limping along is because their customer data and insights are superficial, right? They're looking at
well
the
said.
numbers, they're doing these lazy kind of surveys. And you're saying that the way forward is to think about the stories and to see of, like, what are all these customer experiences like, and look at it really deeply and recurringly, and then try to separate out like four or five or whatever the number is, like what are the customer archetypes and why are they there and how long are they there and what's kind of the start to finish and what's part of their experience, so
Yeah,
that way you can figure out all of those little details that you're mentioning of the plastic or the speed of service. And that way, by just using the combining the archetypes plus the story, then you can figure out some of these sorts of things. And so that makes sense from like a food and Chick-fil-A kind of standpoint. But if someone is listening to this podcast and they say like, oh, I'm in some other weird industry, right? I do
yeah.
databases. How does this apply to me? So how does this work if someone maybe right off the bat just thinks that maybe that it doesn't apply to their company, or they're struggling to figure out how to adapt it for their own purposes?
Yeah. So over the last 20-ish years, probably 60, even 70% of my clients have been business to business, technical, enterprise software, manufacturing, construction, legal firms. I mean, a totally different zone. And I'll tell you, it works. Let me give you a couple of examples here. In fact, I would say it matters even more that you have customer insight when you're in this scenario, because what you tend to have is fewer people that make a bigger decision about you. So they have to be more lined up. It's a risk for them, it's a bigger investment of time and effort. And if this is you, it's this really technical man, you really need to know what they need before you spend a lot of time, money building a database, trying to pitch it. It's not, guys, they don't want your database. They want what your database does for them, right? If we don't know that. Now, I will say this. Here's what I have learned. If you sell business to business and you're selling to an employee, it's not the CEO or owner, right? It's somebody who's VP or lower even. Then I can tell you what we've done the research, worked with a lot of clients on this, and there are two things they want. They may want more than this, but they always want these two things. 99% of the time, here's their priorities. One, they want you to make them look good to their boss. And two, they want you to make their life easier. Like that. Now, do they care about your quality? Well, sure, because hopefully it makes their life easier, right? Like there's no frustration. And then they can say to their boss, look, we solved that problem. It went away. Look how great this is. Or look at all the new stuff we're producing. Do they care about your price? Sure, because they have a budget number to hit with their boss. It's not coming out of their pocket. They really just want to say, I'm good at my job. So we find ways to honor them in front of their boss, not just tell them personally how well they're doing. Tell their boss and copy them. And we give them materials to give their boss. We teach them how to sell this to their boss in the sense of like, dude, this is how you're going to look, and frame it in their world. And we quality, dude, you want to improve your quality. Make it easy. If your quality, you get higher quality stuff, but it requires them to work harder to get it, that's actually going to be a hard sell. So you got to get in their head and know what they actually want out of this deal. And again, now if you're telling like a CEO or owner, then we're going to have a totally different calculation about long-term profit and brand value and all this stuff. But if it's an employee buying from you, yeah, it matters hugely that you know what you want. Because I've seen a ton of business to business things flop because we're pitching the performance of our tool, but we're not saying it in a way that makes sense to their language or helps them think how my career grows. And so in the process, they just never quite get excited about it. And we're like, why can't they see how good this is? Because they don't want your thing, man. There's a bigger story going on. They want how your thing makes their story and their life better. If we can't frame it that way, yeah, you'll throw it out there. Now, what'll happen is if you don't do that, you can still throw your product out there and then they will say, hey, here's what I'm working on. Here are my life goals. Here's my career goals. Here's how you fit into that. But if you're making them do that translation, you're losing some people right there. Then that's just in the sales process. Then you get into the application on service side and how you actually deliver. What do you build for them? How do you follow up? What kind of touches do they want? How frequent do they want them? What does upselling look like? What kind of upsell packages do they care about? How do you do marketing? I mean, everything about your business assumes you know who is on the other end of the deal and you really understand their life. Apple. Apple does this phenomenally, right? Think about their marketing. They almost never talk about the actual product specs. They talk about how cool you're going to be when you use the stuff. It's about you. It's not about them because they get who their customers are. They know what their people want to feel like. So, dude, everything. The more expensive, technical, intense your product or service is. By the way, one of our clients is Nucor Steel. So I'm not currently working with them. I did back in the day, did a few things with them, but I mean, it's commoditized steel, like literally legally required to be the same steel as everyone else's steel. And Nucor in their core market, they're 60+% of the market, man. Oh, and they charge a little more than everyone. I mean, it's only 1% to 2% more. You can't charge anything, but they're a premium player who owns the market because they understand the world, the season. It's all the stuff wrapped around the steel because they understand their customers at a whole other level. Like, wow, we make great steel. Sure, so does everyone. It's the extra tiny little stuff because you know who your real partnership is. That's what makes them the long-term provider for a lot of these big brands. So yeah, man, this is even more important outside of the consumer. The consumer stories are fun to tell because everyone like been to a fast food joint and can imagine those two women. But really, the money is in the big stuff. It's a lot easier in the small stuff to be sloppy. When you have a big, expensive product, you cannot afford to guess, man. That'll wreck you.
This is huge, and this is amazing to think about how easy it is to bark up the wrong tree, right? Because and there's so many ways. There's like infinitely ways to go wrong, and there's only a handful of ways to go right. Because you can just immediately think of, well, it's easy to focus on features or talk about me, and that's kind of the obvious. But the non-obvious is to think that you're appealing to what they want, but maybe you're appealing to their secondary goals and not their primary goals, right?
Yeah,
Because you said
yeah,
a few minutes ago that maybe they want to look good for their boss, and they maybe only have two or three things that are like really important to them, and there's maybe like 10 or 20 things that they're sort of important, but then if you spend too much effort focusing on those secondary
yeah.
too much, then you'll lose them and you're not speaking their language. And you're saying that maybe a fallback is that maybe if you're on coming in from the wrong angle, maybe they will adjust for you and give you those objections and the feedback, and you can kind of fix it. But it's better if you even don't have to do that and just have this sort of empathy and deep thinking and knowing what they want. And it's even cooler that you said that it applies in the sales and the delivery and the follow-up. So this is the way that you can stand out. Even like I love the example with the steel company where like everyone has the same product, but does everyone have the same process and service and everything else? Well, that is how you can stand out. And so there's think about here, and I know that there's no way we can fit all of your cool ideas about the book and your insights into one single podcast, but I really want to make sure that we get to the good stuff. So since we just met and you're way more kind of knowledgeable in this area than I am, what's the missing question here? Like if I were to ask you like just an amazing question that would really just give us a huge insight into you and Legendary Brands and your book, like what should I be asking you today?
Yeah, you've asked really good questions. So don't mean to imply anything other. Man, I think that the big insight, I'll say it this way. If I could leave you with one thing, it is about playing the long game. It is talking about scaling. I'm all about growth. I'm a kind of a grand visionary. My natural wiring is how 10x, 100x thing, and what's 100-year goals, and I love that stuff, right? And I'm it's just Frank. I'm impatient. I'm probably similar to some of you and the guys like we're scalers, like go go go. We get there now, right? Man, it's all about playing the long game. I don't mean slow down. I mean design now something that is going to get you to the long game. And I've seen a lot of times people feel like, man, I have to do this, squeeze people, or I have to really hammer and push, or maybe I'm kind of grind and it's going to be bad for my personal life and I'm going to really squeeze. And we do this stuff that kind of looks like it works in the short term. What you get is a lot of low quality customers. You burn through your quality staff and you only keep the folks who don't mind being beat up on. And it kind of works in the short term. But if you really want to win in the long term, if you truly want to get on the exponential growth engine and take off and not crash, then that's my challenge. Think about how to do this in a way that scales long term. And for example, we just talked about getting your customer insight. Man, you can kind of get a bunch of customers by throwing everything to everybody and try to serve all the different types all at once and make 19 versions of your product. And you'll get a lot of little interest, but you can't scale that really well. Short term, you might get a spike in the next year or two, but at some point that becomes unsustainable. And when it is, you actually get a lot faster growth in the 3 to 5 year range if you narrow down to one key, maybe two, and you really blow their mind. And then you can add another one, and eventually you can have 7, 10 different types of products and customers. But man, pick your highest value, most valuable thing and focus. The power of focus for scaling is so key. And in the long run, you end up way outperforming the guy who randomly grabs this. And I confess, I say this because I have been the guy who chased shiny objects and launched 19 things all at once and paid the price. It is actually the slow path in the long run to be too scattered. Love that you have lots of ideas. Great. Document, make a folder, put somewhere where you can dump your cool ideas for someday. I have a someday folder and I just dump cool ideas in my someday folder. And I've actually now in the stage of my career, I've gone back 3 or 4 times into the someday pile, pulled the best one out, launched the next thing. I mean, it's working, but man, my life really didn't take off until I learned to focus and say, okay, someday I'll get to all those crazy things. I've got to blow the mind and be world-class at this thing for this customer. And then when that critical mass is going, you can build off of that far better than trying to just launch, narrow, started. And that is how you win in the long run. And so, yeah, there's ideas, there's tons of stuff. Pick your very best idea and for your very best customer, one that is super high value for both of you. And then maybe cut everything else. I mean, one of my good buddies, they do private equity acquisition stuff, and their whole strategy is they buy a company, they look for the highest value customer, they cut everything else out and put the whole company's staff on how do we double, triple down on only the highest value thing that we've got. And then they grow that, and they not only get bigger, the profit margins grow. I mean, most companies, it's just sitting there. There's an opportunity that you're not fully maximizing because you're doing too many other things. Lean into that, and man, the growth you will get long-term from that could blow your mind. Even a visionary like me is often underestimated how much can happen when you really make that work.
I love it. Focus. And for some reason, that crude oil analogy keeps coming back to mind, that
Yes.
it's easy to pursue the chaos or the brute force, and that might sustain you for a little while, and maybe even on the short term, and in the long term, it won't scale, and you can't pivot, and it's like short term easy, long term hard. And for some reason, what comes to mind is, we talked about Apple a few moments ago, and Apple always is in the news and doing cool things, right? Like the Apple Watch or the
Yep. Yep.
Vision goggles. But a few years ago at one of their events, they were saying that their only focus was on growing iPhone sales because that would lead to everything else. I was like, hey, that's really interesting. Instead of saying, hey, we'll go over here and go over here, they're just like, hey, this is the biggest contributing factor. And if we just put all the effort into this, then it will lead to everything else. So this is some amazing stuff to think about, some big ideas. And it seems like you've kind of stumbled upon the secret to life and to these nuanced situations, which is to be careful and to listen and to just adapt to what's in front of you. It's kind of like if you want to make a friend or you want to pursue dating, don't just hammer it, and don't just ask at every
Right.
person that you meet. Kind of see what they want, and if you're looking to get a friend, like see if they kind of opt in and see if they
Yes.
want to be friends with you, and kind of see what their interests are. And it's it in all these different ways with our customers and with our business. So
Yep.
what's the next step here, Mr. Scott? If someone says, man, he's had some amazing ideas, and I've already have like that someday folder now has grown to like 80 other things, but I need some help and some focus. I want to check out his book and his company and his socials. Where do we go at this point?
Yeah, so I'm on a lot of the big platforms, LinkedIn, Insta, all that stuff. So you can look me up, Scott Wozniak. But probably the easiest way to kind of got a newsletter, and you can check the book out, and even my company, all that stuff. Probably the easiest link is to go to scottwozniak.com. That's SCOTTWOZNIAK.com. So yeah, it's scottwozniak.com. I got links to all the free stuff I have, the company stuff that we do. That's socials. Everything is loaded up there.
Cool. And it looks like you won a prize by
I
by
know.
mentioning
I know. We got
your
balloons
website.
popped off in the back here. I'll take it.
Yeah, that's perfect timing. I think that's a sign that we should go right now to scottwozniak.com, and that's the hub. And so that way you can see what interests you. If your sort of attention level is just a little bit, you can follow him on the socials, or if it's even more, you can check out his book. Or if you're ready to pursue something interesting and amazing, then go ahead and contact him and start that conversation. And as we wrap up our conversation here, Scott, you've read so much, you've written so much, you've done so much, and it helps me to get a final quote or lesson as the balloons are flying to send us on our way. So, does anything come to mind for you as far as a helpful quote or lesson to really encapsulate our conversation and send us away really super duper excited?
Yeah, maybe not the hypiest quote, but I think it's the most helpful quote. Every great idea eventually degenerates into hard work. I've had a pile of cool ideas, filled whiteboards and notebooks. And it is the actions you take. So pick one thing, go talk to a customer, come up with a new survey question, ask some of your best customers why, like just do a phone call. Take some action. Even one small action you take now is better than the grand theory that you never implement. Every great idea eventually degenerates into hard work. Do something and your life will change. You'll learn more in the process of acting than you will sitting around theorizing all day long.
Very nice. So it's time to get started. It's time to do the hard work, start digging the trench, even those first couple of scoops. And we do that and we think about that. Let's go to scottwozniak.com. That's SCOTTWOZNIAK.com. Scottwozniak.com. Super interesting and amazing speaking with you, Mr. Scott.
Thanks, man. I enjoyed it.
All right, super cool. So